I pressed the right one. Isn't that good?
We are live. So, hello and welcome. Today, I have a very special guest here in the Joyful Business Club. And she's someone who's been a friend for a while since I met her on a blogging conference in 2017, I think.
Oh, that'll do. It has to be one of them. Yeah.
And so,
Absolutely.
in addition to being a foodie and a chef and hosting a popular radio program, she is also a branding expert and a website developer. So, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Aranka Nolan from Einstein Marketing. Thank you so much for being a guest here on the Joyful Business Club.
Oh, look, it's such a pleasure. I'm thrilled to be here. It's in these rather strange and unusual times. I was sort of looking at myself in the mirror and going, oh my God, that's going to be a terrible capture. But anyway, none of us have been able to get near a hairdresser for an age. So we're all sort of suffering the consequences of that. And may they all stay safe, because we'll need them when we're out of this.
Yeah, I was just saying before that I went for a walk this morning. I knew that there had been some reported cases near me, but I wasn't exactly sure where. And it turns out that across the road, there's a major cluster. So I could see all the people out and full PPE gear and, a number of, different community and other services out there. And let's just say it's not good. I'm pretty safe in my apartment with my two boys in lockdown doing single parenting while hubby's away. But, different people have different things going on. And yesterday I found various reasons particularly stressful. And look, this happens. And if this means we don't get to a hairdresser, that's what happens.
It does. There's nothing we can do about it. So yeah, everyone's forgiving everybody for these moments, and that's good. We're exercising great tolerance. Perfect.
So I want to acknowledge that Casey, the Gemini, is online. For other people who are online, please drop by and say hi. We always love to hear from you and ask lots of questions.
Yeah, indeed.
So branding.
Let's talk about branding and why it's important. The exercise of creating a brand is actually much, much more than an icon and some words or a font. And if you can imagine the process that you go through to get to that stage, it's really the final step after a whole lot of strategic thinking has taken place. So let me take you back to the first date that you went on.
Ooh, how much first time? Date ever, or with
well, first date ever, because and the reason I'm taking you there is that what happens when you're starting or trying a service or a product of a company, it's a bit like that. It's the first date, right? Now, like the first date, there's two parties coming to a moment with expectations. And, if you're getting ready for the date, you're going to figure out what you're going to wear, what sort of message about yourself that you want to convey, because it's first date. And it can be a first date as in a blind date even, It's a case where you're going into this with expectations of what the other party is going to be like based on what little you know of them. And there's also I hope they understand me sort of moment. So, we dress accordingly, we make sure we look nice, we make up appropriately, or however it is, the guys shave, polish shoes, whatever, we put our best foot forward.
I'm laughing here a little bit because my lovely Neil famously said I looked like an Oompa Loompa on our first date, and later complained that I wasn't wearing a low cut top. But I'm like, do you think if I was wearing something where everything was on show, what kind of message that would have been sending?
Yeah, exactly. Up here, eyes up here.
And I guess with your brand, it's similar, right? Like in terms of the sorts of trust you want to develop.
Absolutely. And it's a case where, what am I conveying? How will it be received? And it's often many things like, okay, what promise am I making here? Like, what am I committing to? And what problem am I solving for you? Now, obviously in the date, it's like, yeah, hang out with me, be nice to me, let's see where this goes. But when it comes down to a brand, it's often like, okay, I'm buying an Apple because this is what it says to me. I'm buying a Coca-Cola because I feel that it's aligned to my own brand. I'm into Nike shoes because I feel the athlete within me. So the positioning of all of these things, and the most important part of getting this thinking right is so that you know who you are, you know who your client is and what they're looking for, so you can make the promise easily. So there's a whole lot of thought. Like sometimes I work with people for 6 months to get them to a point where they actually really understand not only what the product is in the eyes of the consumer or their best clients, but it's also about how they then present the narrative. How are they going to tell the story? How are they going to sell the situation that says, this is a great thing, it's for these people. It's not for everybody, it's for these people. And these people, we know them well, we know the problem, and this is how we solve it. Come talk to us. Now, that's a lot in effectively what ends up being a logo that is an icon and a font. But of course, a brand is much more than that. It is all the storytelling. It's how you write. It's how you respond. Every touch point that a client has with you is going to hopefully have an alignment to that central idea of why you exist. Why have you breathed life into this entity? What is it that you're going to do for people that they need, and they need your version of it more than anybody else's. And that's really, that's how it happens. That's how all of it started, and even, if you think Amazon for a moment, and I'm picking big brands because we can point to them easily.
And he's currently the world's largest, most significant billionaire, notwithstanding his recent divorce. So his net worth, I saw, is currently at 200 billion, which isn't bad.
Well, he's going to need it if he's going to develop an industry that's off-planet travel. So, good on him. His frontiers are wide. I'm very pleased. But, going to Jeff Bezos, he was very humble in the beginning. He focused on books. And he also said, customer service is everything, everything. So he knew exactly what his Amazon brand was going to stand for, and that it was going to take the pain out of that whole online experience. And he did it. And that then enabled him. Go on.
Yeah, sorry. I remember him saying, in the early days, people didn't even know what the internet was. And, in the early days too, particularly in Australia before Amazon was big here, there were a lot of copycats that we thought were going to take over that. And we now have Booktopia and we have a number of others. But it is interesting that none of them have been really able to displace Amazon for a number of reasons.
So here's a very important thing to understand about Amazon. Jeff Bezos was highly passionate, and this is a message to anybody who's the founder of a business. He was very passionate about what he wanted to do. He was absolutely laser focused on how he was going to differentiate, and he was tireless in his activities. So if you can imagine, even today, there is an ethos within Amazon around that sort of excellence. That culture that you build, that the brand stands for, has all of these things ironed out, thought about well in advance. Not everything, but the really big things are covered. So that you can rely on these guys. That they're going to do what they say. That brand, when I see it, is going to generate this sort of emotion in me because I've tried them. They know what they're doing. I've had success here. Or even if I've had a bad experience, their efforts to make it right have been stunning. And that's just one example. So, brand development is all about getting very clear about, why you exist, what change you want to see in the world, what problem you're solving. And all of that is encapsulated in the visual presence of the brand. And so people know instantly what it feels like to be part of that customer base.
And going back to your first date analogy, before you even get on a first date,
yes,
usually, unless you kind of got some weird death wish, you usually want to see that you actually trust the person who you're going out on a date with, because you want to know you're safe. You want to know a bit about them. So you spend a little bit of time getting to know them before you agree to this date. So there's usually been a bit of chatting online. You probably have checked out some of their credentials. Usually, in my case, it's the LinkedIn page. LinkedIn is not just for business.
Correct.
LinkedIn is
Absolutely.
also about, vetting people. You've checked out their socials. You've checked out a few things before you agree to that date. And I can imagine with brands, it's fairly similar. Before you say, yeah, hey, I'll buy that product, you've probably been cyber stalking them, but not, I shouldn't really use those terms because I don't mean it in that way, but you've been, monitoring their presence, noticed their brand come up a few times in different contexts, and notice the way that it's coming up. Before you even think, okay, let's now go on that date or on, make that purchase.
So social validation is really important as part of the brand. And when people are starting out, there is absolutely nothing wrong with going out to the marketplace and saying, look, we're building an X. We're not really sure who it's for, but we really want to talk to people to see who is wrestling with this problem and how they are solving it or need it to be solved and haven't found a solution. There's nothing greater. And that will enable you to have a core bunch of fans who will flock and happily be the talkers of what's going on in your story. And so even that very humble activity is a great way of refining your story and identifying who are the best clients for you.
You see who is interacting with you and why, and you start to get for me particularly, I start to get to know a little bit about their motivations, how they're doing, how are they coping through COVID, how are they coping financially right now, for instance, in the frugalista sense, what are they interested in? So then when I write things, I have an idea already about what my community wants. Now, I disclaimer here is I don't always listen as much as I perhaps could. I don't even listen as much in the Joyful Business Club as I probably could. I don't engage as much. I don't ask as many questions. But when I do, it's often surprising. It's often not what I think it is in terms of what their interests are or concerns are.
So one of the other things that I want to throw into the thinking here is that don't wait for it to be perfect. You've got to be prepared to get out there, get messy and try it. It's not elegant. Seriously, it's not an elegant experience unless you've got buckets and buckets of money, which is no one, right? And when you're starting out small, like even if you talk to 2 or 3 people, it doesn't have to be 50 and 100 and focus groups and all that sort of stuff. No. Start with a small group of people that you can create respect with, even if it's 2. And once you create a product that you'll always be improving it, you'll always be making it better, tweaking it a bit, and that's the role. It's the journey. The first person who did the first internet for somebody, website, oh gosh, they would cringe if they saw today what they did back then. But the whole journey of learning, the first podcast that went out there, oh, ugly. It probably sounded awful. I don't know who did the first one, by the way, but you know what I'm saying? It's just the human thing. The first house we built, it's the human condition. And so you do have to do some base thinking, and please don't just create it and go, I'll fix it later. Because what that means is you haven't thought about it enough. And somewhere along the line, you're going to go, And then you're going to have to redo it all anyway. And you've wasted time and money, because brands and marketing always are thus. just it can be clean, it can be honest, it doesn't have to be complicated, but you do have to do the thinking, even if you don't necessarily have a logo, which I'm going to say is probably a bad idea, but the thinking is the most important part. What do you stand for? What are you solving? How do you tell the story about that? And then the brand becomes your face. So, there's all of that to consider as well. But the thinking is very much about, what are you doing? What are you solving? What change do you want to see in the world? And how are you differentiating yourself against other people who are maybe doing it better initially? So remember that blogging conference we went to? Remember,
Yes.
one of the ideas that was put forward was, do the research, check out everybody else who's doing something similar to you, price it at 75% of what they are, and double the effort in behind them. And then you'll be a screaming success. Not overnight, but eventually. And it's like, okay. But it is about starting.
It is about starting, and I'm laughing too, because one of my businesses I'm looking at, I'm selling at about 50% of my direct competitor. But that said, there's also doing things a little bit differently, and I'd forgotten about that. But it can be quite daunting when you're thinking about your competitors who do have strong brands and they do have strong followings, and thinking about how you're going to differentiate yours. So how would you advise startups to go about that? How do you start thinking about, well, you've got some competitors, but how do you create that face for you that's a little bit different?
So what I often look at, the name is really important. If you've got a catchy name, that's important. And it's a bit like naming a dog. You're going to say it a lot. It has to be memorable, certainly for the dog, but choose well, right? It has to stand out. And this is sometimes where you need help with that. But anyway.
Yeah, actually, just to pause on that too, I always run potential names plus my husband, who has that kind of filter of, little boy humor, of toilet humor. And if there is a rude connotation to it, he will find it. He'll find an acronym of it. He'll find, a way to abbreviate it. So I always run it past the Neil filter test to see if there's any way that any of us can work out that it's going to end up with something inappropriate. Because, that's the worst thing, isn't it? When people spend all of this time and money, and then they realize, and it may not even be in this context, it may be that once it's translated into another language, your target market, it has a completely different meaning to what you intended.
So I remember an instance with Vodafone. They had this whole idea around on. So anyway, the thing that came out of the advertising agency was more on. But of course, when you sort of stood back, you were saying more on, and you seriously, but no one saw it, until you were the first set of eyes looking at it going, and I saw it and I went, no. Anyway, there you go. These things happen, and you do have to shop it around with people who are going to tell you that's not going to work. So that's important. So the other way of differentiating is, have a look at what you are good at. Like for me, for instance, I'm good at brand work, and I'm good at, creating events and experiences. So you bring those two stories together, or the food part, creating experiences for people. Bring two of your skill sets into the one story so that it's not just you doing, in my case, just brand work. If people look hard enough, they'll find I'm a woodworker. And if that resonates with them, or if they look even harder, they'll find that I'm from a farming environment. So I'm a roll-up sleeves type of girl, right? That will also resonate well with certain people. They'll get that. They'll want someone who's not the fast-talking, young hip guy from an agency, for example. They want someone who's tried and tested, maybe. In the instance of certain other things, you bring together two aspects of yourself. So the narrative is a little bit richer. And then it's also about, okay, the competitors are all doing X. What else can you plug into that that's either a freebie or an act of generosity? It's like when people offer some downloadable thing that is a time saving for the client. And invariably that gets shared. And if you set it up the right way, then people start talking about it. And then you can make that into something bigger, a competition even. How do you attract attention to yourself? Because when you think about it, I think the number's something like this. There's 11 billion pieces of information that hit us every day. How are you going to stand out against the Coca-Cola, the McDonald's, all of this other noise before we talk about competitors?
I'm laughing here again because I'm a frugalista with sustainability trends. So like I'm not even Coca-Cola or McDonald's, so that's really easy.
No. Yeah. But you'll filter that out. But what I'm saying is that there are a whole bunch of other people who are like drowning in the sea of all that noise. How are you going to make a difference? And you have to be quirky and a bit different and a bit interesting. And again, it's about telling a greater story. So, yeah. But it means that you've got to get a bit out there and get a bit brave about being definite about who you are and how you want to be seen.
Yeah.
And so that is that takes thought, because once it's out there, it's there forever.
Thank you for that. And actually, I wanted to go into a point you mentioned earlier, which is how, people often do change brands. Well, that's your experience. And it is a lot of effort to change brands, but it does happen. But in that spirit of imperfect action, you just start. And just to share, what is now the Joyful Frugalista started from a blog called Weekend Parent. So I had a blog. My main blog was Taiwan Shifu. It was when I lived in Taiwan. It was, food reviews and other things. One weekend, my ex-husband went overseas and I was left with the kids. And usually I was not the main caring parent and my kids were quite young. And like, I love my kids, but I didn't always know what they played with. And I tell them not to play with things that, they were playing with every day. And it was just this disconnect. So I started this blog called Weekend Parent and I did, a few little bits and pieces. And then when I became suddenly single, I started on that blog writing more about budget recipes, and it was no longer a good fit for that brand. So then, and I know you're not ever meant to rebrand websites because it mucks up your SEO, but I did. But anyway, that's just the way it is. So I changed it to Miss Frugal Is. So, which is all about frugality. And it was because my former mother-in-law always said that I had frugal ears. So she understands Chinese face reading. And it was just a bit of a slur, but I actually thought it was kind of cute. So I took it up. And then that led to me writing more, which led to a book contract. And then the publishers, Murdoch Book, wanted me to change my name to the Joyful Frugalista. So now we have a whole new rebrand once again. Now, that's obviously not the ideal way. The ideal way would have been to come up with the Joyful Frugalista and the nice pink and everything else to start with. But life often doesn't happen smoothly, does it?
No, it doesn't. And it really, the most important message of that is that, you get to a point, and it's a journey. It is a journey.
Yeah.
But you can avoid some of it by more thought. And you know what? It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's like, are you happy with where you are? And you couldn't have got to there without the other. So, that's a beautiful outcome too. And you pivoting in this day and age, you must pivot as frequently as you see fit. And, that means that you get to re-engineer yourself. And I don't think that's a bad thing either. Yes, it mucks up with the SEO, but so what? You've repositioned it. And if you get it right, you'll instantly have a whole new audience. Great.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing is that, as personally as you're changing, and in my case, I was going through quite considerable change, so I was going through separation and divorce. My first husband was from an Asian background. He's Taiwanese. So we were very much in a Taiwanese background. So not only was I leaving that, but, culturally, there were big shifts happening too. My lovely husband, Neil, now, he's definitely is not of a Chinese background. He's very Oz. So, a different,
and he's a sweetie.
And my life has gone through quite a cultural shift. So if I was still pretending to be back there like I was 10 years ago when I started my first blog, it's not true to who I am, is it?
No, it isn't. And, that's the joy of where we are. Like, there was a time where you didn't have the internet. right? And I'm showing my age, but so what?
Oh, I remember it.
Yeah, exactly. But now we can reinvent ourselves. And that's great. And the only reason why I'm saying is that if you spend a little bit more time thinking through it, rather than what I often hear is, well, I'm really good at doing X. And it's like, yeah, but you're not thinking about the client when you say I do X. So an accountant, for instance, yes, they're doing the tax returns, yes, they're doing these things, but what value are they really giving? And it's peace of mind, and it's the ability to have support. And you can get very naked with your accountant, for example, which is an interesting
Not
concept.
literally, hopefully.
No, but metaphorically, like if you've got a good accountant, and I mean, these are the services that I brand, and it's like, okay, so you either have a niche of, I handle the accounting for the farming community, or it's like, well, I'm in the food game. But that sort of whole story is, how do you say that to a client, that you can get naked with me and you'll be in safe hands? Like, I've got your back. And you throw up these sorts of words, because you then decide, that's not the way I want to be phrased, or it's actually, it is. Now, obviously, that doesn't translate into the brand, but we need to understand what it is that we are giving the client. What emotions are we generating within them, that they're going to look at our logo and go, yep, there's the promise, and they're fulfilled. And that, to me, is it's quite a puzzle to bring together. And you've done it with the Joyful Frugalista, for instance.
Well, actually, before, we've got one question, and then we're going to wrap up. But I must say too, though, late last year there was this whole push while I was writing for the Daily Telegraph under the Savvy Shopper column. My publisher wanted me to rebrand again, and my former literary agent wanted me to as well. And at that point, I actually said no, because I sort of thought the rebrand was actually too soon, and I thought it would be confusing. And yeah, so there is a time sometimes where it's too much pivoting, it's just too confusing. But I have one question which Yelena has asked: can a brand recover from a bad branding experience, or is it worth starting over?
There are ways of rebuilding trust. Absolutely. I have solved that with corporations where the CEO has done the wrong thing. There is a methodology of how to do it. And the very simplest thing I'm going to say for the last few minutes is that when you're rebuilding a brand, it sort of depends on how much is at stake. So if there's a whole lot invested, and it's going to really be super hard, then a rebrand is how it's done. You change the name. It's interesting. They're talking about the AstraZeneca vaccine being rebranded in the same naming system that Europe is using, because they find that the stigma around it is now too hard. That's interesting. Okay. They could have taken the story and explained it to people in a better way if they wanted to keep it. Okay.
Yeah,
so
which is an interesting one too, because I have a friend who has extreme allergies, and she's actually been told not to have Pfizer because AZ is safer, according to the literature. So yeah, there is literature out that definitely supports that, but they've chosen not to go down that route.
So they've chosen to rename it. So when it comes down to recovery, it sort of depends in the first instance on how much is already invested in one brand. And that said, there is nothing better than saying, you know what, we made a mistake here. If you absolutely acknowledge it, and in the same breath explain how you're going to fix it and how you're not going to do it again, and then you reaffirm that by validating it through the narrative. So there's a situation whereby a direct mail campaign was sent out in London to a whole bunch of people, and the draft copy was not vetted properly. Now, the draft copy had a heading on there that said, sorry for the swearing, but dear fat bastard, right? And this was their copy. It was supposed to be just a bit of fun between the agency and the client, but for whatever reason, it went out there. And so, of course, everybody who was involved with this marketing campaign went home and wanted the earth to swallow them up, right?
Yeah,
I would have been the same, right? So what they did was, as they should have, they immediately wrote to all the clients who received this and said, "We are terribly sorry. We made a mistake. This is how it occurred," you know. And they sent off a bottle of champagne as well, saying, "Terribly, terribly sorry. What we're going to do is make sure that we, don't do it again," and all those sorts of things. And to just validate that, we're going to make sure that you get the very best of service, and we make a commitment that we will answer your call within 3 minutes. So they established what the criteria was, how they were going to apologize for making this blue. Anyway, it hit radio. The CEO was interviewed and various other things happened. Now, what turned out was that most of the clients, I think only like 2 people, were so horrified that they lost them as clients. Everybody else, because they responded so quickly, had a good laugh and said, "Silly you." And their situation amplified beyond that. So recovery is possible, is what I'm saying.
Thank you for that. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to acknowledge that Janie Allen has just said that she rebranded not that long ago, I think within the last year. So she had Style Edge Image Consulting and she rebranded to include her name, Style Edge by Janie. And I can see definitely why she's done that, because so much of her is in what she does. And a lot of her following is very personal, and all of her branding, all of the photos and everything else is now consistent with that image.
Yeah, exactly. And, therein lies a great case study. Go have a look at it. Yeah, I'm hoping that she might have before and afters. But it's interesting, the Commonwealth Bank, I don't know if you've noticed recently, but when the icon was changed from Commonwealth Bank to CommBank, and they had the Sayo biscuit with the Vegemite on the side, you'll notice now that the black has been taken out because it's too austere, too sharp, and now it's a soft gold, which I think is really a stunning step. So brand evolution is the other thing to think about. How do you refresh a brand? That might be another conversation for another day.
Well, I'll look forward to it. So thank you so much for being my guest. This will be turned into a YouTube clip, and please subscribe and follow the Joyful Business Club YouTube page. I would really appreciate that very much. This is now a regular series that, now that my work times have changed, we're reorienting to Wednesdays, usually Wednesdays 2:30, sometimes at other times. Next week, we have the wonderful Wendy Marmon, who some of you may know, talking about her new leadership book that is going to be out soon. So I hope you can join me for that fabulous chat. And thank you so much, Aranka, for being my guest. I've enjoyed being on the other side as a guest on your radio program for most of last year. And thank you for generously sharing your knowledge on this as well. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye.